ಬಂದಿದೆ ಬಂದಿದೆ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ, ಹಿರಿಯರೇ ಇತರ ರಾಜ ರಾಣಿ, ಹತ್ತೋಣ ನಾವು ಅವರ ನೆನಪಿನ ದೋಣಿ, ಕೇಳುತ್ತಾ ಖುಷಿ ಪಡೋಣ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ, ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಖುಷಿ ಪಡೋಣ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ, ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಖುಷಿ ಪಡೋಣ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿ. ಇದು ಹಿರಿಯರ ಕತೆ ಹಿರಿಯರ ಜೊತೆ ನಿಮ್ಮ ಹಿರಿಯರ ವಾಣಿಯಲ್ಲಿ. ಕೇಳ್ತಾನೆ ಇರಿ, ಖುಷಿಯಾಗಿರಿ. Hello listeners, this is your RJ Chandana and I welcome you all to Anubhav, a joint project of National Institute of Social Defence, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India and Media for Community Foundation, implemented by Nightingales Medical Trust. Project conceived by Dr. R. Sridhar, Project Investigator Alok Verma, Coordinators Pooja Murada, Sai Sudha, Kaushalya. Government of India has initiated an elder line toll-free number 14567. Elders or anyone on behalf of elders can call between morning 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. for any questions, queries and support to elderly.
Yeah. Okay. So I came up with this title, Bangalore, A Tale of Two Cities. As Ushanti said, I'm a third generation Bangalorean. I think one of the rare species who's been for 3 generations of the family has been in Bangalore because, as Ushanti said, I mostly take children on walks, heritage walks around Bangalore. And the first question I ask them to sort of impress upon them the uniqueness of Bangalore is I ask them, how many of you were born in Bangalore? So a few hands go up. I mean, quite a few perhaps. And then I say, how many of your parents were born in Bangalore? And far, far fewer hands go up. And since every class is a microcosm of the city itself, I use that as an example to show them that really Bangalore was and continues to be a city of immigrants who, once they arrive here, are so taken by the charms of this beautiful city that they rarely ever leave. So they come to study perhaps because this is a city of many, many educational institutions, colleges, so of good quality. So people come from all over to study in these colleges here, or they may come to work here because once again, if in ancient times, during the times of the spice route and the Silk Route, if Delhi was sort of the gateway into India, and then later when in the 15th century, when Vasco da Gama found the sea route, or even before that, when the Arabs were trading with us, then Bombay was sort of the gateway into India. But since the 20th century, since the last few years, last decade of the 20th century, I think we can safely say Bangalore is the gateway into India. It is where all the young people are. It is where all the excitement is, where all the unicorns are, unicorn, right? They're the $100 million companies. And they're all operating out of Koramangala and Indiranagar. And this is a city of entrepreneurship. This is a city of sunrise industry, whether it was the call center thing that happened maybe 20 years ago, or the biotech industry, or the IT industry, all of it is happening here. So this is definitely the new gateway into India. And I try to tell the children that, so your parents came here and they loved the city so much that they never left. And then now it's them who complain about the traffic. But we don't, it's very clear where the traffic comes from, right? It didn't happen overnight. It happened because people have come in and made this wonderful city their home. I mean, so it's a double-edged sword, being born and being inheritor to a wonderful city, because it means that it's always under threat by everybody else who finds it wonderful and wants to come and make it their home. So you have to, in your heart, keep it welcoming enough to allow people to come in and enrich your city, but also retain your own pride in your city and make sure that it doesn't lose its most central character of being warm and welcoming. So it's a huge responsibility on the citizens of Bangalore. And I'm glad, and I think many of you are old Bangaloreans. Would it be safe to say that? Would you just raise your hands for me if old Bangalorean means you have lived here for at least 30 years, perhaps? So yeah, most of you, that's wonderful. And as you know, we are on the cusp of yet another assembly election. And that's going to happen very soon. And one of you just said that you're coming back just in time to vote. That's wonderful. And anybody who has voted in Karnataka for more than 3-4 elections knows that, yeah, Veena, yeah. So we know that basically any basic manual about voting in Karnataka or how the caste divisions unfold, how the voting goes, it's never complete without mentioning the Lingayats and the Vokkaligas. They're the large caste groups in Karnataka. And it's very clear almost like how they vote. And it's all, the Congress stronghold has been, of course, the old Mysore region, of which Bangalore is a part. And here is where the Vokkaligas are dominant. Whether you take and North Karnataka is where the Lingayats are dominant. So the Vokkaligas usually have the surname Gowda. They are landowners, they are peasants. And of course, the story of Bangalore also starts with a Gowda. And his name was Kempe Gowda. And of course, we have made it in the last year or two. We have gone a little crazy, I think. And we have Kempe Gowda everywhere, all over the city, including a gigantic statue at the Kempe Gowda International Airport. As soon as you come in, you have this huge statue. And of course, recently, to pacify both groups before the assembly elections, 2 new statues were unveiled in front of the Vidhan Sabha. Both were equestrian statues. One was of Kempe Gowda, of course, because he can't be left out of anything. But to pacify the other group, the other was of the 12th century poet, philosopher, saint Basavanna of the Lingayats, who's also on a horse. So both these new statues have been added to the Bangalore landscape recently. Now, why am I calling it a tale of 2 cities? Because there were 2 cities, Bengaluru and Bangalore, very, very distinct in character. Of course, if you for an outsider, it looks like, well, it used to be called Bengaluru, then it began to be called Bangalore, and now it's called Bengaluru again. It's the same city, right? But no, there's a huge undercurrent of history and lots of politics and lots of people behind the Bengaluru transition. And it's never been the same place that was called all these names. Now it is. Okay, so I had promised to start with how old is Bangalore? What do you think? Any guesses? Mr. Shastri, 400 years old, you mean to say? 400 and something? 400 odd years old, okay. Anybody else wants to hazard a guess? How old is Bangalore? I can't see people in the next screen actually. So if there is somebody there.
Around 600?
About how much? 600. 600 years old, okay. Okay, so anybody else has a Jaya, you want to say?
750.
750? Okay.
That's what I feel.
Okay. So the thing is that when people come into Bangalore to visit Bangalore, people usually think of Bangalore as a young city. And Bangaloreans themselves think of their city as a young city, because the problem we have as Bangaloreans when we have people visiting us from other cities. We're like, okay, what's there to see in Bangalore? And then we are like, Lal Bagh, Carbon Park, Vidhan Sabha. Then we're out of ideas because we have no clue what to show them after that. Because Bangalore is not a sightseeing city in the regular sense that it is, that a sightseeing city is usually Delhi or Bombay, Calcutta. There's so much historical buildings. Delhi has old forts, the Mughal monuments and everything to show. But in Bangalore, we don't have any monuments of that kind. We don't have historical monuments. So we're always feeling at a bit of a loss. And therefore, we think of Bangalore as, it's just a young city, we don't have all that history. And not only for that reason, but because Bangalore has a young vibe. I don't know how to explain it, but anybody who comes to Bangalore feels there are a lot of young people everywhere. Very rarely do you see a lot of old people. There is very little visible poverty. So it feels as if Bangalore is a very middle class, educated town. Everybody has some kind of decent standard of living. There's a lot of youthful energy. The kinds of establishments, whether it's food and beverage or whatever, are pubs and then all these new entrepreneurs are coming out of here. It's very with it as far as tech and everything is concerned. So we all tend to think of Bangalore as a very young city. But like Mr. Shastri said, and like you all said, like Usha said and Jayanti said, it is actually a very old city. And we as Bangaloreans are not aware of it at all. So Mr. Shastri was closest to the official age of the official Bengaluru, which came up in 1537. It was set up by Mr. Kempegowda the first. And this happened in 1537, which means in another, 14 years, Bangalore will be 500 years old. 500, we'll be celebrating our 500th anniversary. So 500th birthday. So that's quite amazing. That is already quite old for a city, 500 years. But that is only the official age of the city. Because if you, in the end of the 19th century, there was a gentleman called Benjamin Lewis Rice, B.L. Rice. And he was an educationist. He was an inspector of education. He was a British person, but he had grown up in Bangalore. His father, the Reverend Rice, had set up a church and schools and everything in the old city area. And if you are familiar with Avenue Road, if you're walking into Avenue Road from the State Bank of Mysore side,
on the right-hand side,
on the right-hand side, you will see the Rice Memorial Church. It's still flourishing, it's a beautiful little building, the Rice Memorial Church. That was where the elder Mr. Rice, the senior Rice, was a pastor. And his son, B.L. Rice, Benjamin, he grew up in Bangalore, spoke Kannada fluently, and was very much a fan of Kannada and Karnataka. And he became inspector of education. And he used to travel around the state, visiting schools. And during that time, he got very, very interested in epigraphs, inscriptions on stone that he saw all over the place. And he realized that nobody had bothered to interpret them or document them. And the British, they have a great love of documenting everything, which we as Indians do not have. We are so happy to leave everything vague because we realize everything is very, very old, that stuff repeats, that history is not linear in our minds because of our understanding of life as samsara, reincarnation, time is cyclical to us because we take our cues from nature, like all ancient civilizations. We look at nature, we say, in the spring, the flowers come, and then in the fall, the leaves fall, and then we wait, and it looks as if the tree is dead, and then once again it rejuvenates itself. So we have our idea of time as cyclical, whereas in the West, in Christian theology and everything, it is linear. It starts with the day of creation, it ends with Armageddon. So it's sort of like a linear journey. So we think of it as a thing, and we don't see any point, therefore, in documenting stuff that went in the past because we believe it will go, it will come again. There's nothing to hold on to. So we don't document so much. Anyway, this Mr. Rice, he began to document every epigraph that he saw. He got pundits and scholars in Hale Kannada to come and interpret it, work on it, and started documenting all the inscription stones that he saw. And he documented something like 7,000 inscription stones across Karnataka. And he brought them all, collected them all and put them in 2 volumes called Epigraphia Carnatica. Okay. And while he was doing that research, in a temple in Begur is near Silk Board, that infamous Silk Board junction full of traffic. There, somewhere there near Electronic City is this town of Begur, is an old settlement of Begur. And in a temple there, he found an epigraph that mentioned Bengaluru, a town called Bengaluru. Now, the interesting thing is that inscription stone was dated to 9th century BCE, which pushes back Bengaluru's age by another 600 years. I forgot to tell you, which will make my story less dramatic, but I forgot to tell you one more thing in between. In between, what happened was, I'm sure all of you know the other wonderful story about the founding of Bengaluru, or the name, how the name Bengaluru came, the town Bendakaluru. So those who are not familiar with that story, it dates back to the Hoysala king Veeraballala II, and that was in the 11th century. And the story goes that Veeraballala set out for a hunting trip, as usual, into the forest. And he started chasing after a deer or something and got completely separated from his companions. And like all kings were, he was completely not carrying any food or water or a GPS, nothing. So he was completely lost without his minions. And night began to fall. He began to get very hungry. He's getting a little desperate. The sounds of the wild animals were getting louder. And he's like, I have to find a place to rest for the night. And when he started scanning the forest a little desperately, he saw a light in the distance. And he said, if there is a light, that means there is habitation. Humans are there. So he rode like the wind towards the light and, pushing his poor, tired nag, and got there and found that the little flickering light was the cooking fire of a little old woman who was cooking her evening meal, a very, very frugal evening meal of beans, boiled beans. And of course, kings are not used to waiting. They're not used to being patient. So he just fell at her feet and threw an almighty tantrum and said, I just need to eat or I will die, mother. Please give me something to eat. And of course, this old woman had no idea who he was, because there was, in those days, you never saw your king really. You very rarely knew what he looked like. You even heard that your kingdom had been taken over maybe 3 months later, after the war had happened somewhere far away and the news trickled down to you. She had no idea who he was, but just out of the generosity of her heart, she shared her meal of boiled beans with him. And the king was well pleased and went off to sleep. And the next morning, the king's people came looking for him. And they were like, they were all falling at his feet and saying, Your Majesty, Your Majesty. And the old woman was, oh my God, this is the king of the land. I had no idea. And the king said, okay, thank you. And I'm going. But, before he went away, he said, I must do some appropriately kingly thing. I have to leave my mark on this place. And he said, to commemorate in honor of the generosity of this little old woman who shared her evening meal with me, this town shall henceforth be called the town of boiled beans, Bendakaluru. And off he went. And the people of the town must have said, why? We had a perfectly good name. Now this king comes, calls us something else. Now we have to practice this new name. And they went on Bendakaluru, Bendakaluru. And it was worn down by so many tongues repeating it, that it eventually became Bengaluru. So that story dates from the 11th century. So the 16th century Kempegowda story has already been pushed back by 4 centuries to the 11th century Veerapalala. But B.L. Rice, finding that inscription stone, pushed it back further by another 200 years to the 9th century BCE. Then here's an interesting story. So this is quite a new development, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years. So there is a gentleman called Uday Kumar. He's an engineer, software engineer, who isn't in Bangalore, but anyway, he's a software engineer. And he grew up in Rajajinagar. And somebody told him, did you know Rajajinagar was called something else in the old days? And he said no. And he felt very stupid that, we all live here in this city and know nothing of its history. We will tell you World War II history. We will rattle off names like that. But our own neighborhoods, neither do our children know, and we can't even blame them anymore because we don't know it ourselves. We have no interest in finding out. So he decided to start exploring his own neighborhood. And then it was COVID time and all that, and they had cycles. He said, I'm working from home. I want to go cycling for exercise. And to just make it interesting for himself, he and a couple of friends got together. They got Rice's Epigraphia Karnataka. And they said, why don't we ride to these places where these stones are supposed to be, these inscription stones, and see how many of them are still there. And when they took on this as a project, they realized to their horror that a lot of them were missing, those old stones, or they had become used as paving, part of the pavement, or they were lying in some ditch somewhere. Nobody realized the value of that stone or what the inscription on it said. So off Uday Kumar went to the Mythic Society, asked for a grant, spoke to people there, got a big grant, took a 3-year sabbatical from work. And now what he does the whole time is 3D imaging of all these old inscriptions so that they are preserved for posterity. Even if the actual stone cannot, he's also taking the stone and installing them in little mantapas and making sure the people of the neighborhood know what it is and they take some responsibility for it. That also he's doing. But he's also 3D imaging them so that they're not lost ever for anyone. And during this research, they came across a epigraphic stone, which Mr. Rice had not found, had not documented. And on that, there is a story, it's a Veeragallu, means there is a story of a great hero of the place. That's usually what either the inscription stones recorded donations made by different people or whatever to the temple or to the king or something, or they recorded some heroic deed done by a person of that neighborhood. And they found the story of a man called Kittaya, who from the Ganga dynasty, who had held off some enemy and died in the battle. So that was the story of Kittaya. And The Kitaya story is, it said, had happened in a place called Perbola. And in Hale Kannada, Pedda, like, or meant big, like how it does in Telugu now, big. Now we say Hiriya, but that time it used. So Perbola was which town, which neighborhood do you think? Hebbal. So Hebbal was mentioned in this stone, and it was dated to the 7th century. So although Bengaluru as a town may have come later, this neighbor of Bangalore called Hebbal had existed well before that, which used to be a village or something. Now it has become absorbed in this big megapolis of Bangalore, but it was a city in its own right, or a village in its own right, which had its own heroes and, Veeragallus, its own wars, all that. And now there is another copper plate inscription that has been found of the 5th century BCE, which mentions Begur again. So Begur is again become the oldest, so sadly for all of us, we have to say that Bengaluru really started at Silk Board Junction, as far as we know. most infamous traffic-ridden site, but that's where, so maybe it's in our genes to have a lot of traffic because it started there. Anyway, so that is the antiquity of Bangalore. And I will say, watch this space, because, I don't know how many of you know this, but Roman coins from 27 BCE, that's 2050 years ago, were found when they were digging up the place to build HAL airport. So in places like Koramangalam, in HAL airport and all, they have found Roman coins, which means whatever settlement was there were trading with the Romans at that time. 1 minute, excuse me. I'm so sorry. Some courier happened. I'm sorry. And my health did not know what to do. Anyway, so, and then if you go back even for the 1000 BCE, which is 3000 years before, they have found the burial sites in Koramangala, etc. So people have occupied this place for a very, very long time. And we like to think of it as a modern new city, which is fine. That's what makes Bangalore so special. I think it has that very young vibe to it. Anybody who comes here can feel it immediately. And we don't have that baggage of history. We don't harken back, like always to, the good old days when Maharajas, nothing. We are like quite happy to be very much in tune with the future, with an eye on the future, not an eye on the past. And that's what makes us who we are. Anyway, so let's get to the official story though, Bengaluru. Our Kempegowda, the Kempegowda the first. So he was a vassal of the Vijayanagara Empire, which was the largest and most powerful kingdom in the south, right? So he was a vassal of that empire. Before that, this is also an interesting thing which I have to tell you. So before the Vijayanagar people came, the Hoysalas, who we talked about, Veeraballala, they used to own part of this. And who did the Hoysalas beat? Who did they chase away from here to become masters of Bengaluru, of the Bengaluru region? Which dynasty do you think? And which particular king? Ponniyin Selvan. Rajaraja Chola the first used to rule Bangalore at that time. And the Cholas were ruling Bangalore. That's why we have a lot of Chola age temples.
Temples, yeah.
Yeah, we have a lot of Chola age temples, if you know. There is the Chokkanatha Swami temple in Domlur.
Domlur, yeah.
Yeah.
Someshwara temple.
Yeah, Someshwara temple in Alsur.
Yes.
So these are all Chola style temples. So the Cholas used to rule us. And before that, it was the Rashtrakutas and the Kadambas and the Chalukyas and the Gangas. So the Ganga people had most of the control over Bangalore part. Then the Hoysalas, then the Cholas came, then the Hoysalas, and finally the Hoysalas declined to coincide with the rise of Vijayanagara, and Bangalore became part of the Vijayanagara Empire. Now, of course, everybody knows Vijayanagara Empire, everybody knows of Krishnadevaraya, but he was gone by 1529. He died in 1529, so his reign was over. And Kempegowda founded Bengaluru in 1537, so 8 years later. So who was the king in Vijayanagara at that time? It was a man called Achyutaraya, right? So Achyutaraya and Kempegowda was the farthest reach of his kingdom, of the Vijayanagara kingdom. He was the ruler of a place called Yelahanka. Okay, so Kempegowda was the ruler of a place called Yelahanka, which is to the north of central Bangalore today, as you know. And Yelahanka, he did, what was the role of chieftains, vassals who guarded the outposts of the kingdom, whose little kingdoms were at the outposts of the larger kingdom? Their role was to maintain an army for the service of the main king, and also to send a regular tribute, an annual tribute to him. So our man Kempegowda was the chieftain in charge of Yelahanka. He did very well for his king in one of the battles. And as a reward, Achyutaraya told him, ask me what you want and you can have it, because I want to thank you. And Kempegowda said, oh, you know what? I know exactly what I want to ask for. Yelahanka is old. I'm a little bored of it. Can I have permission to build myself a new capital, please? And our Achyutaraya said, okay, sure, go ahead, build yourself a new capital. But there is a condition. There is a little rider that I must add. And he said, yes, what is it? He said, whatever you build, you will only build a mud fort encircling it, not a stone fort. And he did this to secure his own safety, Achyutaraya, because he said, if I allow him to build a stone fort around it, that will become defensible against my armies. And I will not be able to, he'll probably break free, declare independence. So he said, only if you build a mud fort around it. And Kempegowda said, fine. And apparently he set out one hot day. Now, if you say if it's a hot day, then we have to think a little about which month could it be, because there are so few hot days in Bangalore. So it must have been March, April, something like that. So he set out from Yelahanka, started going south to identify a place to build himself a new capital. And imagine the times, okay? So this whole moniker of Bangalore, the garden city with all this lush vegetation, this wasn't the case in those days. Because if you think about it, and if you drive in Bangalore a lot, you may not have realized, but if you've ever walked or cycled or gone running in Bangalore, you know that Bangalore is built on a series of hills. If you've gone in Mahalakshmi layout or near the ISKCON temple, it's always like, huge hills everywhere. So we are built on a series of granite hills, actually. And granite hills are not the most, friendly for lush vegetation. So most of Bangalore's vegetation that we see and enjoy, and we call it the garden city, has been planted by hand. There were lush bits in the valleys in between the hills where the water collected, but most of it was just rocky land. And if you have ever wondered why our metro takes so long to build and why we have such few sections that are underground, this is the reason. If we have to build an underground metro in Bangalore, we have to tunnel through solid rock. And it's already an engineering marvel, the amount we have built underground. The part near the Vidhan Saudha and all, which we didn't want to despoil by putting, an overground metro there. That took the longest time because we are digging through solid granite. And we have so much granite here that while it's considered to be such an expensive building material in other parts of the world, here we use large granite slabs to pave our pavements badly, so that everybody can trip over. No, it's never it's never even kept nicely. But now they're, of course, trying some different thing, those interlinking blocks they're doing nowadays with the smart city or whatever the new thing is. Anyway, so we have a lot of granite. So we built on a series of granite hills, which do not support much lush vegetation. So if Kempegowda was coming from Yelahanka to here in the absence of roads and in the absence of trees, and it was a hot day, he must have felt very tired pretty soon, and then decided to take a little nap. And some scrubby vegetation was there. He took a nap, but he was soon woken up, maybe an hour later, by a scuffling in the bushes. And being the king he was, he jumped to his feet in a second, drew the sword from his scabbard, saying, "Who goes there?" And when he took a closer look, he felt a little sheepish because it was just a little hare, a rabbit that's scuffling in the bushes. But the unusual thing, as he kept watching, was that the rabbit or the hare had turned around and was snarling at a pair of hounds who got so psyched by the sight of this aggressive rabbit that apparently they turned tail and ran howling for their lives. And Kempegowda said, my God, this is Veerabhumi. This is heroic ground. You know, it's an omen. It's a sign. It means if rabbit could chase away the hounds, then maybe one day I, who am like the little scared rabbit, will be able to chase away Achyutaraya from Vijayanagar and be independent. So he said, this is a sign and I'm going to build my city here. Okay, so that's the story. It's a nice story, but it's also a story that is repeated as a founding story of many empires, including Vijayanagara. Even Hakka and Bukka apparently came back and told Vidyaranya, their guru, that we saw a hare chasing away two hounds. So it's a story that repeats itself. And maybe that's why Kempegowda let this story spread, because it was the same story of founding of Vijayanagara, and he probably thought, aha, this is a sign that my country, mine will also grow. But the reason why he probably chose the place he did, which is the place he did choose to build his new city, the south of the Mysore Bank Circle, right? That whole town, which is Avenue Road, Chickpete, Dodpete, Akipete, Balepete, that was all built by Kempegowda in 1537. Let me try and show you a picture of the map of it. Where is it? Where is it? 1 minute, hang on. PowerPoint. Now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this is the town. Okay, this is a map of the old town. And you can, that's all it was. I'll show you another picture so you can place it in the map of Bangalore today. So this is how it used to look, but this is just the inside. It's a sort of a trapezoidal fort. And you will see that, can you see my cursor?
Yes, we can.
So there was a double wall, and the double wall was filled with these prickly soapnut bushes. Okay, to keep animals and things away, and also to keep soldiers' horses away. And there were 8 gates. Let me try and find the other picture for you. Yeah, so this is the Pete. Okay, the same thing that we saw zoomed in is this. And this is a stone fort that came up later, not in Kempegowda's time. This was the actual bastion where all the armory and everything used to be later, not in Kempegowda's time. So this part is the 1537 part. And let me see. So now we can place it in Bangalore. This is the red thing which I have marked. That is the mud fort, and to the south of it, the stone fort, right? And if you go further up, this green part that you see is MG Road, Parade Ground. And this part that you see is the Raj Bhavan, where the Raj Bhavan is today. Okay, and if you see the numbers, that is the height above sea level of these places. So you can see that the highest points in Bangalore were the first ones to be built up. Obviously, when you live on a series of hills, you will want to build on the high parts. Why? Because so that you don't get caught in like Bangalore floods like last year. Because what they have done is they have taken over all the lower parts, the new builders, and they have taken over lake beds. Now, Kempegowda builds his town, and basically he chooses to build it there because of the height. If you build on a hill, what is the advantage of building on a hill? You have a good view of the surroundings. You can see when the enemy is coming, right? And you're spared the water flooding in, etc. during the rains. So, and because we were built on a series, we don't have a river in Bangalore. Most cities were built on the banks of rivers, old cities, right? But Kempegowda chose to build it here where there was no river in sight. But there's no river, ocean is very far away. The only reason, but there was a lot of water here. How come? How was there a lot of water here? Because wherever the land dipped naturally, the rainwater would go down and collect and become a natural. pond or lake. So natural rainwater harvest. So many, many, many little lakes and ponds. And Kempegowda took advantage of it and constructed tanks instead of, so that that water would stay there. It wouldn't run off or evaporate soon enough. And one of the tanks he built was the Alsur tank. It's actually, we call it Alsur Lake, but the correct name for it is Alsur Tank because it was built, man-made. And if you think about how you get to Alsur Lake from MG Road, say, can you imagine that? Do you go down or up from MG Road to reach the Alsur Lake near the Gurdwara? Down. So you have to go down. So Alsur Lake is one of the lowest points in the city. And race course, where the Raj Bhavan is one of the highest points. And you will know that it's one of the highest points because what is the name of that locality where Raj Bhavan is?
High Point. Yeah, it's called the High Point. And also there's a tank road.
Not High Point. It's called
High ground.
High ground. High
Okay.
grounds. So that was called high grounds for a reason. Anyway, so our Kempegowda builds this and he has this full city all built up. It's wonderful. It's lovely. Also, remember that if you imagine a map of India in your head and you draw a line bisecting the country from north to south, and then you just took the southern peninsula and you drew another line bisecting it from east to west, the point of intersection between these two lines is Bangalore.
Wow.
Bangalore is bang in the center of the southern peninsula, and it's on the main north-south line of India itself, which means it's also equidistant from both the coasts. If you draw a straight line, if you go east, proceeding east from Bangalore, you'll hit Madras. Proceeding west from Bangalore, you hit Mangalore. So we are all in a straight line, which made Bangalore a very strategic location for trade. So trade in the era before steamships and before petrol, diesel engines were invented, sailboats used to only be able to make short journeys. And these short journeys from Arabia to the west coast of India, and then they would cross over by land, go to the east and travel further east, from there. And what was being traded mostly at that time, 14th, 15th centuries, when our Kempegowda was building Bangalore? What was being traded?
Pepper, spices.
Spices. The spice route, basically, it was very, very vibrant. And most of the spices came from the east of, the Malayan archipelago and all those kinds of places. Sri Lanka gave all the cinnamon. And of course, our Malabar coast was rich with pepper, the black gold. And that used to travel a lot. So Bangalore was very strategically positioned even for that. It was right in the center. So Kempegowda builds his town. And then he discovers that, slight technical issue. There isn't enough of a local population to populate my town. So like any real estate developer today, like a Shobha or a, Raheja or whoever, Prestige, he advertises. He has to advertise. He's saying, well, I have a new town all built and ready. Will you come and look at it? It's fantastic. You should just come and stay. It's really lovely. And what would you think it would have been advertised as? What would he tout as the benefits of moving to this town? One would be, of course, that everybody will say it has great weather. We're at an elevation, it's lovely weather compared to every other land around it. We are just doing wonderful. So
Yes.
that is one. Then he would have said, trade. Nobody was going to be attracted by the weather. They were like, boss, where's the money? Where can we have good trade? So he said trade is also very good. And he must have said, 24/7 security. There's a strong mud wall around it. We have guards at each of the 8 gates. So that's a good thing. And he might have said that we have water. So where was this water coming from? So to the northwest, at the northwest corner of his fort town was a lake or a tank called the Dharmambudi tank. And it was full of water and it would supply his city. And the Dharmambudi tank existed till the beginning of the 20th century. I mean, until the 1930s even, that lake was there. But today it's no longer there. And I'll tell you sort of the approximate location of the Dharmambudi tank, and then you can think and tell me what it has been replaced by. So
Kantirava Stadium.
No, not the Kantirava Stadium. Kantirava Stadium is Sangpangi tank.
Yes.
Bus
Big
stand.
tank, but it's the Sangpangi tank.
Bus stand, I think. Bus stand.
KSRTC bus
Majestic,
stand.
that's right. So the Majestic bus station, bus stand. That
Oh,
and
okay.
it's the beautiful. In Gundurav's time, they made it into this, with ramps going down.
Yes,
So the
yes.
drain. So it's a very beautiful structure. But that was the place that used to supply water to all of Bengaluru at that
Okay.
time. So there were many tanks. Anyway, so he said, must have said water, there's water. So people came. And the 8 gates of the town, there were like 8 gates in 8 different directions, all thrown open to receive people to come and see and come and settle. And he said, I've got even little enclaves, separate enclaves for rice traders, Akkipete, Bangle traders, Balepete. I've got a separate enclave for salt manufacturers, Upparpete. I've got one whole separate section for postmen, for post and telegraph. That was not telegraph, post, which is called Anchepete. So I have all these places already made, and there's enough room for bullock cart parking. I've seen to that also. So come and see. So people came, a lot of weavers. And once they came, they loved it so much. Everything that he said was true. Plus they found benefits that they hadn't been told about, including the sweetness of the people. Yeah. Thank you, Jaya. Including the sweetness of the native people who welcomed them and made them feel at home. So I love telling this story about Bengaluru and the other story about the boiled beans, because I think they contain in them the germ of what makes Bangalore so special, that it's generosity to outsiders. We have always opened our hearts. If you see even the location of Bangalore is so weird. After the States Reorganization Act came in 1956 and the new state borders were drawn, we are sort of stuck in a corner of Karnataka, right? We are closer to Tamil Nadu, Kerala, and Andhra. You can go to Lepakshi and come, you can go to Hosur and come, you can go to somewhere in Kerala and come faster than you can go to Bijapur from Bangalore. So it's a very strange location. But because of that reason, it has always been a place whose gates have been open. The gates that Kempegowda threw open in 1537 are yet to shut. People are still pouring in. When they come in, they love it. They do not leave. And while we might complain and crib about all that, water, everything's becoming expensive. All these people, these immigrants from outside, and they're all speaking Hindi, and they're all, they're taking away the basic character of Bangalore is gone. All this we complain, but we have to also admit that Bangalore, they have enriched the city by their presence in many ways. And in fact, that the reason Bangalore has become such a vibrant city of the future is because new ideas are constantly pouring in, and we are able to welcome them and absorb them, assimilate them. And somehow what Bangalore ends up doing to newcomers also is making them Bangalorean. In the sense, they come with all their chips on their shoulders and, we're going to talk to people like this. We're going to talk to cabbies like this. We will never learn the language. They will never learn the language, leave that. But everything, and they'll come with all these chips on their shoulders. But sooner or later, they find them being smoothened off. And they also settle into this wonderful laid-backness that is Bangalore. And they also lose their tempers and their tantrums, and they give up their jobs. They take voluntary, they take pottery classes, they join some NGO. They want, this just happens to people who come to Bangalore. And this is how did we get this? Not only from, I think we got it in our genes, not only from the wonderful Vijayanagar Empire, but more recently from the wonderful Maharajas of Mysore. The later Maharajas of Mysore were such liberal, large-hearted people who were able to balance in themselves a very Western outlook and a very Indian grounding, rootedness. And that is what they managed to send down. That's what has percolated down to the people of the old Mysore state. Like Jaya Chamarajendra Wadiyar he was going to be a concert pianist. If his dad and uncle hadn't died and he had to come back at the age of 21 to take over, he was training under Rachmaninoff. He would have become a great concert pianist in Europe. That was his destiny, he thought. but he had to come off at 21 and join and become a king. And before he was 27, the party was over. 1947, he took over in 1940, 1947, it was over. And then he went back to, and during that time, it must have been so stressful, the poor man. He wrote so many kritis in Sanskrit in honor of Chamundi, and they have become part of the repertoire of Carnatic musicians who sing today. They sing these kritis. So that much Indianness and this whole scientific, liberal outlook. They would celebrate Beethoven's 200th birthday in Bangalore and also have Chamundi Puja over there in Mysore. So they were able to, you know, balance all these two things. And that didn't come from Jaya Chamarajendra. It is an old history of that. His uncle, Krishnaraja Vodiyar IV, who was Nalvadi Krishnaraja Vodiyar, one of the greatest kings of the Mysore state. His father, Chamarajendra Vodiyar X, he came to power in 1881. Okay, and Chamarajendra, 1881, so long ago, what did he do? One of the first things, apart from so many other wonderful things that happened during his reign, he set up a House of Representatives of the People. He was making imagine a king setting up like a democratic institution, like a House of Representatives of the People. But he did. He said, I need you to advise me. I'm not like some dictatorial king sitting here. Okay, that was Chamarajendra Vodiyar the 10th. He took the throne at 18, was dead by 31. Very sadly, he caught diphtheria in Calcutta, he died. His son, Krishnaraja Vodiyar, this one, the Nalvadi Krishnaraja, was only 10 when his father died. His mother was only 28 something. Krishnaraja, Jaya Chamara, what's his name? Chamarajendra Vodiyar's wife, Vani Vilas. She was only some 25, 28 or something. She'd already had 5 children. Krishnaraja was her oldest. Now what to do? He cannot become king. He needs a regent. So she said, I will be regent. Despite her grief, despite all her responsibilities, her children, she became the regent. And she could only have the courage to do this because of the amazing divans of Mysore. We had amazing divans also, prime ministers. And the divan at that time was Sheshadri Iyer. So Vani Vilas and Sheshadri Iyer together brought so much glory and wealth and wonderful things to Bangalore, like including the Indian Institute of Science. That was signed during that time. The Victoria Hospital, the free hospital. And next to that, the Vani Vilas, named after the two queens. Yes. The two queens. Victoria was in England and Vani Vilas was Mysore. And both were free hospitals open to the public. Then they also, Sheshadri had set up the Shivanasamudram hydroelectric project, which brought electricity to us. All this in the absence of the king who had died under the regency. Okay. And because of that, in 1902, Karnataka got electric power, hydroelectric power. And the king put out a tender, a global tender. We have this, we have these waterfalls. There's a lot of power there. And we need to extract electricity from there. For what? Why did they need electricity? They needed electricity because in Kolar, gold had been discovered. The mines were among the deepest in the world, the Kolar Goldfields mines, and we needed electricity to extract that gold from deep inside the mines to the top. And who was the man who was in charge, who had by chance, he knew, he had heard some whisper to the ground that there was some gold there, and he'd gone and bought off all that land, took a contract from the king, saying that, from the king of Mysore, Maharaja, saying, I have all the rights to everything that is mined there. And he went there, but he then discovered that, without electricity, can't do very much. And he sold off his part of the thing. But then he had already shown that there was gold there. So he sold it to a big corporation. And that corporation got after the Maharaja, saying, we need power, we need power. And that's why electricity. But where is Kolar? To the northeast of Bangalore. Where is the power generation? Shivanasamudram near Mysore, southwest of Bangalore. Okay, very far away. But the power, so they put out a global tender, and which company won the tender? General Electric, which was the company that Thomas Edison had founded himself. Okay, and they won the contract, the American company. They came here, they set up the hydroelectric project, and wires, electric wires were drawn from the southwest of Bangalore to the northeast of Bangalore, the longest power transmission lines in the world at that time. And this was Asia's largest hydroelectric project at that time. And Bangalore, as always, location, location, location. It happened to be in the right place at the right time. Those transmission wires had to go via Bangalore. If you're going from the north, from the southwest to the northeast, you had to cross Bangalore. Bangalore is in the way, so excess power came to Bangalore. 1905, Bangalore was electrified. Earlier than so many cities in India and Asia. Okay, one of the first. And all this because of Seshadri Iyer and the Queen. And then Krishnaraja Vodiyar growing up in this kind of environment where science was prominent, education for girls in Mysore, in the kingdom of Mysore, education was paramount, and not just any education, but education for girls, including our Mr. Rice, Reverend Rice. He had set up the first school for girls, Mitralaya Girls High School, and all. They're all part of the missionary school.
Yes, yes, right.
But the king also encouraged it, and English education for girls, not just. And this was a time when princely states in India, other princely states in other parts of India had no such thing going on. It was all about the king, king, king. Here, Chamaraja was setting up House of Representatives. Our Krishnaraja Vodiyar took over. He said he made it bicameral, House of Elders, House of Representatives, which became almost like an actual democracy. He was outsourcing his job to the people. I mean, imagine how secure you must be to do that. Krishnaraja Vodiyar did a bunch of wonderful things. And then he actually ruled for a longish time, 1901 to 1940. So that was quite a long reign for the Vodiyar family. Most were very short. They died very young. He managed to hang around for a bit. But when he died, Jayachamarajendra came in. And correctly, right, in order, he had to give up to an actual democracy. Right. So when India became free, you remember that whole story of Mr. Patel, Vallabhbhai Patel, going from, we had some over 500 princely states whose signatures were needed, who all had to agree to become part of the Indian constitution, the Indian state. And many of them kicked up quite a fuss or took their time. Who was the first king to sign the instrument of accession? Jayachamarajendra Vodiyar. And he made such a wonderful speech. He said, if the time has come, then I do it with, people are calling it a sacrifice. What sacrifice? This means my people, the kings have fulfilled their job of making the people fit to rule themselves. So I sign this with great joy. If we have done our work, it's time for us to go into the background now. So that's the kind of kings we had, amazing. But let us dwell, now we're almost out of time. So I'm going to dwell just for 5-10 minutes on the amazing British people. Let's not forget them. Again, Bangalore, I feel Bangalore has very good karma. We've always had like really good, even the British people were very good, the ones who served here. So what happened? In the middle, we forgot that whole Tipu Sultan Hyder Ali episode that went on for 40 years. And while it's now fashionable and trendy to say Tipu Sultan was that kind, was a horrible guy and this, that fundamentalist, all that. If you look at history, Hyder and Tipu were the bulwark. They managed to stave off the British like nobody else did in the rest of India. They defeated the mighty British army not once, but twice in the Anglo-Mysore War. So they formed like a formidable defense against the British for a long time, at least in Karnataka, in the south. So Hyder Ali had to take over Mysore, sort of. It almost came to that because the king was quite incompetent at that time, the Mysore king. He takes over. He was a commander-in-chief of the army. He was very powerful already. So and the Mysore treasury was being looted by all kinds of people because the king had no control. So Hyder Ali takes over and rules for everybody obeys him because he's the commander-in-chief of the army in any case. And he manages to rule 1760 to 1782. He dies in 1782 in the middle of the Second Anglo-Mysore War. And everyone thinks, okay, Hyder Ali is a great strategist and fantastic soldier. His son won't be able to manage now because he dies in the middle of the Second Anglo-Mysore War. The war is not over yet. And not from wounds sustained in battle. he dies from what is described as a carbuncle on his back, which we think must have been a cancerous tumor. So he dies of cancer, and his son Tipu is away fighting somewhere far away. Tipu was never trained to be a soldier. That was not supposed to be his destiny. He was not the oldest son. He was just one of the many sons. He had been born after Hyder and his wife had prayed to a Muslim saint called Tipu Mastan Aulia. And so then Tipu had been born, named after the saint. And Hyder had promised that I will give him to the clergy. I will give him to the priesthood. And so he was trained as his early education was all in the Quran and stuff like that, religious education only. Until our Hyder Ali discovers that his oldest son has epilepsy, the one he was hoping would take over after him. Then the second son is not so good at strategy, just not such a great fighter. And then Hyder suddenly wakes up and says, excuse me, what is this child doing, only filling his head with religious stuff? He's still my son and he needs to be given some martial training. And he pulls him out and discovers that this boy, while he's not as strategically good as his dad, has the courage of a tiger when he fights. And so he becomes Hyder's nominated heir. And once his father, and everybody thinks, but he's some prayerful guy and he's very pious and all. I don't think he has the dum to actually finish this war to any effect, but he does. Even the second Anglo-Mysore Tipu comes back and again forces the British. He dictates the treaty to the British. Okay, and then his PR is much better than anybody else's, than his dad's for sure. He calls himself the Tiger of Mysore, strikes terror into British hearts. In the East India Company's offices on Leadenhall Street, he's really called a terror, and British mothers are telling their children, if you don't drink your milk, Tipu will come and get you. That kind of bogeyman status. And he allies with the French like his dad did. And he gets the French engineers build him a mechanical tiger, life-size mechanical tiger, mauling an Englishman lying on his back, and this tiger, and it's a pipe organ. And if you wind it up, the tiger roars and the soldier screams in pain. And this is the kind of toy that his children play with in full view of British officers who are in his dungeons in Mysore and Bangalore. And those British officers are being guarded by live tigers at night, live hungry tigers that Tipu has as pets. He has tiger stripes on his flag. He has tiger claws on his, he wears them as rings to eviscerate the enemy. He has tiger heads in gold, eyes, rubies set as their eyes on his octagonal throne. All this stuff, okay, much PR is done. And he's regarded as a very, very worthy enemy for the British. Unfortunately, in the Third Anglo-Mysore War, he loses. Why? Because think of the year. It happened in 1791. Okay, and our Tipu had friendships with the French, right? Now, let me test your world history a little. What happened in 1789? Important world event. French Revolution, that's right. So the French Revolution happened, which meant that Louis XVI was ousted, and he and his wife Marie Antoinette, they lost their heads. So when there was no leader, the French army everywhere else in the world was in disarray, and they did not help Tipu Sultan. And the person in charge of India at that time was a man called Cornwallis. And he had just come to, who was Cornwallis? Let's go a little further back into history. 1775, which important world event? I can't hear you, Jaya.
Mutiny or something like that?
Waterloo?
No. Huh?
Is it Waterloo?
Not Waterloo yet, Mr. Vasudevan. 1775. American Revolution, Declaration of Independence in America. Okay, so that happens in 1775, and the war breaks out between the American colonists and their masters, who are the British people. The British and Americans begin to fight. Americans take the help of the French. Benjamin Franklin goes to the court of the Emperor, Louis XVI gets help, etc. And 1781, the final battle is fought, and America wins. It happens in a little town called Georgetown. And who wins? Who is the American general who wins? There's only one. He became the first president of America. George Washington. So Washington wins. And who was the English general who lost that war? He was Cornwallis. Nobody in history, nobody remembers the name of the vanquished. Only the victor. Okay, so Cornwallis loses. His reputation is in tatters. He has lost America to the French, right? Basically, the English and French were fighting all over the world. So everybody else who were allies with the French are just by the way. But